Thank you. So welcome everyone to the PatternFly demo. We have a number of things on the agenda for today to cover with you, and we're going to start off with interaction design. And I think the first one up is Stacy. Do we have Stacy? We don't yet have Stacy. Okay, I'm going to jump down.
Here.
Oh, you're here. Okay. Hey, Stacy.
Sorry. Yeah, let me share my screen.
Yep.
Okay, can you guys see my screen?
You can.
Okay, so this should be pretty quick. Today I'm going to show I worked on design documentation for the About modal for PatternFly 4. Super simple, basic, introduces all the elements of the About modal, kind of explains in certain places additional information where the user might need it. And then just very general usage guidance. So this kind of piggybacks onto the content that we created for the modal documentation that I think was presented last demo. So that's the About modal design docs. And then this is a work in progress, but I think it's interesting. So we've been working on demo content and design docs for contextual help. So specifically, how can you use PatternFly components to introduce contextual help into the user interface? So we've been outlining usage standards for things like tooltips, when to use, and then popovers. So what's the difference between a popover and a tooltip, and when should you use which one? How are they dismissed? How are they triggered? All that good stuff. And then also things like syntax hints, and just defining usage guidance around that that's a little bit more robust. What we're going to start doing now is including, so there's information that we have that's separated out for like help on forms. So we want to include all that stuff in this contextual help demo so that it's all in one place, and we'll just have to figure out a good cross-linking strategy so that you can see any information that you need to help you be successful with forms in the contextual help demo, and vice versa. And I think that that's it for me.
Okay, great.
Any questions? Okay, stop sharing.
Stacy. And Matt, I have you up next. Verona.
Yep, I am here. All right, let me share my screen out. So I've been working on a draft of a design document for alerts and notifications. So we have an alert component, and this document is intended to provide some guidance on how designers can use that alert component in both in the context of inline notifications and toast notifications. Talks a little bit about what the difference between those are, where they appear on the page, the different use cases for when you will use an inline notification or when you will use a toast notification. Also talking about actions in notifications and different types of toast notifications that may or may not have embedded actions. The piece of this that I still I'm yet to document is use of the notification drawer. So talking about how notifications, the life cycle of a notification, and how that notification sort of propagates from the through to the notification drawer, and I guess that's about it. So this is still a work in progress, so hopefully by the next time the next demo, I'll have this further along. But I welcome any questions or comments that people have. Feel free to comment directly in the Google Doc. Any questions anybody has right now? Okay, very good. That's it for me.
Okay. Matt and Rachel.
Hello. My work is in a similar state as Matt's. For this first document, I'm working on progress bar. So I'm using the template that Stacy put together to talk about usage and the anatomy of a progress bar. So working on a common language that we can all use to describe the different labels within a progress bar and the things that make up a progress bar. And then also writing documentation for determinate progress bars and indeterminate, as well as when to use both and how not to use them. And also I'm interested in documenting the do's and the don'ts of placement within a progress bar, and then placing that into context. So for example, how would I use a progress bar in a tutorial from the user perspective? Or how would I show a progress bar to indicate when a file is downloading and where we're at in the process to a user? This is all really in wireframe stage. And then we even get into content because titles and percentages really matter for a progress bar, as well as if we have the opportunity to talk about time remaining, then that would be great to include as well. And then a few different states that we'll be showing is a state that demonstrates a progress bar that tracks user progress by percentage. So if we have a known percentage of how far along you are in the process, and a state that demonstrates to the user a system's progress through downloading a file or an application. And we also, and I believe we already have this, this is just a GIF I found, but we already have a PatternFly branded determinate and indeterminate progress bar. So this is very much in progress, and that's all I'll share today, but I'm excited to get it in a place where we can go ahead and get it into GitHub.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and so just to back up a little bit, this is all as we see design to documentation today on our website. This is documentation that we're looking to do specifically for the PatternFly 4 components, but also making some adjustments to improve on how we've done documentation in the past and improving that moving forward. And as Rachel just said, we do have a place on PatternFly Design GitHub repo where the PatternFly 4, this work in progress is happening. So if you want to check it out there, or the Google Docs. All right, so thank you. We'll move on to visuals. We have Michael with the new input fields.
Okay. So while we were working on filters, which is based on our input fields, I went back and looked at the accessibility requirements for input fields, and we noticed that what you see here, which is our current input field design, actually doesn't pass accessibility. We're thinking that the content would pass, so the label or the content within the input field would kind of push it over to pass. But the input field component itself actually has to. And as you can see, it's kind of a light gray border with a small corner radius. And that actually doesn't meet the contrast requirements. So we had to fix that because we want to be as accessible as we can. Sorry, I wasn't even, there we go, full screen, okay. So the first thing we did was actually increase the color to meet the contrast requirements, and we decided that that just didn't look how we wanted it to, especially when you put it over gray. It just kind of starts to look kind of wireframey. It's not really in line with the rest of our aesthetic. Even if you take away the white background, it still feels very wireframey, especially on the gray background. It doesn't feel like a very final, considered visual design. Take away the border and just go with the white background, it starts to look a lot nicer, but it doesn't even come close to meeting the contrast requirements. So we can't do that either. So here's where we landed. I think it was Jen had the idea that, or pointed out that we can actually change just the bottom border. And you see this in a couple other design systems as well. So we wanted to see if we could make it work with ours. And as you can see, we kind of keep that light gray border radius across most of the whole input field. And then on the bottom, we use a darker color to actually visually define the input field from an accessibility standpoint, which allows us to, I'll zoom in a little bit, which allows us to pass accessibility while still kind of getting an aesthetic we like. And we actually think this looks nicer than our old input fields. So it's a really good example of how accessibility can actually lead to a better design overall. So it also, like I said, we like it a little bit better. It gives us some cool affordances from a visual perspective. So here you can see the active state where we bring that bottom border up to 2 pixels and we turn it blue. Then a hover state below where it just goes up to the 2 pixels and remains same color. And the nice thing is all of our kind of error states or alert states and anything to do with input fields and all their various shapes and sizes and different forms all translates really well to this new design. And I think it works really nicely. It also works really well over gray. So we get that nice white on the light gray that I was talking about earlier. But we also get the accessibility from the bottom border, which even passes on this gray. So that's great. And it also translates really well to a dark background. And this is just an example for this presentation. We would probably never use a dark background like this in this layout. And then it also extends everywhere from our dropdowns to our input groups. So anything that's based on the design of an input field. We're finding it translates really well to everything. So overall, much better design. We think it works better functionally. It passes accessibility, and we think it looks better visually as well. So I think it's a great example of how accessibility-driven design can end up with just a better result overall. That's it.
I agree. I love this story. And just FYI, it does come across a lot lighter in blue jeans. So I can hardly even see the side and top borders. But so I don't know if there's a link that you can provide in the agenda so people can go out and take a look at this.
Absolutely. I can put a link to a PDF or this presentation in the agenda.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Michael.
Sure.
Nice job. Okay, Christy with labels and filter chips.
Hi, everyone. So I worked on the design of the filter chips and labels, so I wanted to share those. We'll start with labels. This is what we had originally in PF3, so kind of these sharper edges, different colors to denote different states. And in PatternFly 4, it's a bit slow, we're going with these rounded edges to fit in with the other designs we have in PatternFly 4. Just that one primary color of our default blue, just to start, just to keep them all unified. And this smaller rounding, it's not too large where users might think it's a button, but it's enough to kind of put it, make it a label that will fit next to different titles and different components in PatternFly 4. And we have 2 different sizes. So the small label would fit into tables. So that fits into that height here. And then we also have larger labels, which will fit into the input groups here. So yeah, there's a lot of different contexts where these labels fit into. So it's important just to recognize that we do need 2 different sizes for these. And this is the hover and active state. So it just changes to that darker blue. So that is labels. And then for filter chips, this is what we had in PatternFly 3. So again, those sharper borders, this almost looks like a label, the one that we're going to be using in PatternFly 4. So we wanted to distinguish these filter chips from labels, and also had to think about the nature and behavior of filter chips. They come and go as a user like filters, searches, checks what filters they want. So it's important to realize that they're kind of temporary in nature. They can be removed as easily as they can be added. So that's why we went with the design of a thinner border around the edge, a large icon to remove the filter chip. And then this is what they look like grouped. So it's also important to realize that they will mainly be on a toolbar. and the toolbar already has a lot of visual clutter. So that's why I just added this lighter gray background behind the filter chips to stand them out on the toolbar, but also not to bring too much attention to them. And then this is what the filter chips look on the hover state. So just that light blue, that blue light border around there. And then this is what the filter chips look like on a drop-down multi-select. So the user can choose choice 1, populates here, and then choice 3, populates here. And yeah, and they fit in nicely to that input group. So that is filter chips and labels.
Thanks, Christine. Any questions there? All right, Michael Coker, you're up with tooltip and popover CSS.
Hey, yeah, I worked on the tooltip and popover a little bit. Let me see if I can get my screen share set up. Can you see that?
Yep.
Okay. So this will be pretty quick. The tooltip and popover, they previously had examples of buttons that would have triggered the tooltip or the popover in the workspace, as well as a bunch of custom spacing and formatting just for the workspace. And so we removed everything that was not associated with just the tooltip and popover directly. So here we only have the popover and tooltip code in the workspace now, and broke this up into different examples and sections for each of the modifying classes. As part of this, just cleaned up the CSS for this a little bit. There were small CSS adjustments, handlebars adjustments, and documentation adjustments. One noticeable change with regard to accessibility for the popover was changing the area attribute from area popover to area modal. And then also as part of this, to meet new accessibility requirements for the close button on popovers, we updated the global variable that we use for accessibility that gives us a minimum height and width for a target area. And that was, I believe it was 32 pixels before, and that's 44 pixels now. And that's about it.
Great. Thanks, Michael. Now we'll jump over to React. Amy, I know, is not feeling very well and has a hoarse voice, so Titani will be covering her list work that she has completed.
Yeah, so hang on, let me share my screen. All right, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yep.
Okay. Demo Amy's list component.
Oh, we could hear her. And then, are you talking?
Can you hear me? Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah, I think you went out for a little bit there, but okay, we can hear you now.
Okay, hang on one second. I just realized that Amy's list component is not in my view, so.
I think she might have put the link in the chat.
Yeah. Oh, she did?
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
hang on one second.
Oh, yeah, that's.
Great. Perfect. All right. So Amy worked in the list component this iteration. So you can build a list component with list items inside of it. So this example here is of a simple list where she just has 3 items in here. And then we have a simple, then we can have 2 different variants for a list component, an inline list. So the items will appear one after another. And then we have a grid variation. So these items appear on like a grid layout. So to get the grid, if you're going to set it to grid, and for inline, you set it to inline. So it accepts the children, which would be the list items. Then if you want to apply any styling, and the variant. And you can put whatever you want as a list item. And that's pretty much it for the list component. Now let's go into what I worked on this iteration as well. And I worked on the bot modal. So the bot modal has the logo. Then you can give trademark information, the product name, any content you'd like to put in here. We have the branding information here, close button, and this backbone hero image. So the React component accepts the children, which is the content that I showed over here. Then you can pass in a callback of what to do when you click the close button.
We still seem to be seeing the list.
You're still seeing the list?
Yeah.
Oh, did you even see the modal at all?
No.
Really? Okay. Hang on one second. Okay. Are you still seeing the list right now?
Yeah, I think if you're sharing just the application, you have to make sure that it's in the same tab.
Oh,
window.
okay. Okay.
There we go. We can see it.
You can see it now?
Now I see GitHub. I
okay.
saw it for a second.
There, do you see it now?
There it comes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. So this is the React bot modal. And as I was saying earlier, no one saw. This is the logo up here. And we have the trademark information, the product name, and you can put whatever content in this area here. And here we have the branding, the close button, and the hero image over here. And here is the props that the bot modal accepts. The children, which is the content within the content area of the bot modal, and any specific styling that you'll like to apply to the modal. A callback for what to do when you open and close. Oh, when you click on the close button. Sorry, yeah, that's this. Here, the on close. And a Boolean to say whether the modal is open or close. And then product name, trademark, the images for brand, and some alternative text for accessibility, the logo image, and alternative text for accessibility, the hero image, and alternative text for accessibility. That's pretty much it for the bot modal.
Donnie, just one comment.
Mm-hmm.
For that block of text where you've got the sort of lorem ipsum placeholder text, it would be great if that, because the about modal is almost always going to be a standard like just form with a bunch of version numbers of things. I think in the core demo, there's like a set of things. It would be good to have that in here because for the most part, when a developer uses this, they're just going to, modify the parameters that they're going to show in here. So it would just make it easier to have that pre-formatted, I think.
Definitely. So I can update that to match what's in the, I think it's about modal demo area.
Yeah, if you look at the core demo, they've got the text formatted for that. So.
Okay, great. I'll update that.
Yep, great. Thank you.
Yeah, that's it for me.
All right, thanks, Tony. Next, we have Carell.
Yeah, hey guys.
Hey.
Yeah, let's wait for yeah, perfect. So I worked on progress bar to be implemented in React so it can be used very easily. Here are all the variants which are possible with the progress bar. I took the same approach as in the core PatternFly Next repo with the examples. So here we have normal progress, small progress, large progress, progress with outside of the progress bar, not on top of as well, progress inside of the progress bar, success, failure, success with the measurement inside, failure with on the right side, and so on and so forth. Here are the prototypes for each for the progress bar. Very easy. Anybody have any questions? Ask.
Great. Thanks, Carell. Appreciate that. Next up, we have Yoko.
Hi. 1 second. I guess this one. Can you see a page with buttons?
Yep.
Okay, good. All right. So first up, I'm just quickly going to demonstrate. I added React Live to the React documentation, which you'll see. Now you'll see this, the code examples, the code for the examples underneath the visuals. And here's some of the few things you can do. You can just start typing in here. For example, this first button, I'm just going to change to is block prop. You can see it updates right away. Or for the second button, I can add this disabled prop, and it makes it disabled. So it makes it a little bit easier for developers to test these and for others to play around with these. Of course, you can change the text. You can pretty much do whatever you want. Here's another example. If I go to the dropdown, you can see right now that this is what the dropdown looks like. And what might not be obvious is that we actually import all of the React icons. So for example, if I go into this dropdown item right here, and I start to type in my React bell icon, maybe I'll add one more for the settings, cog icon. Okay, and then if I go back to the dropdown, you can see that now we've composed React icons together with the list, with the text. And then lastly, one more example that I'll show you guys. For example, if you're writing a layout and you're testing it out, or you just want to play around with that, let's say you want to come to the grid layout. I'm just going to copy paste something here. So instead of this grid, you can compose it also with other React components. So we inject all of the React icons and all of the React components, and then you can test and resize and play around with it. So makes it easy to test, right, and I guess play with it. All right, that's it. And then coming over to my actual work for the past sprint was the page layout. And you can see it's right here. I know it looks very exciting. It's the structure. If you go down, you can see the props. And there's still a little bit of work I need to do. That's why you don't see any descriptions yet, just because I need another day or so to finish this up probably. But essentially, you can pass in the layout prop. It can be either vertical or horizontal. And then you can pass in a number of our React components, or we leave it up to the user basically, but they can pass in the background component, logo, nav, toolbar and avatar components, and then just a couple more properties related to the nav. I've got a couple demos, which basically mimic the demos that we have for PFNext. Do you still see that on the right? I don't know if that is being seen now. I just pulled out a tab to the right.
Now we can see it.
Oh, okay, cool. I wasn't sure if it only shares one instance of Chrome. Okay, so on the left, you've got React implementation. On the right is the core implementation. So coming to our first example, you can see it's fairly close, but this was actually a really good thing to do to actually create this demo, because it exposed a few issues that I found. For example, you can see this dropdown over here has some has a border here that it doesn't have over here. A couple alignment issues, and also while the main title is not properly, it's not a proper heading right now because we don't have the content component yet, which I guess will come at some point. But you can see right here on the left is the React implementation, and it plays pretty nicely. You know, the icons get added to this ellipsis dropdown, and you've got the toggleable sidebar over here on the left. And then just a couple more examples. Here's the next example with the expandable nav. And this is another issue that was exposed. Actually, there's a CSS specificity issue related to the icon on the right for the chevron. So that'll have to be fixed in PFNext core, I believe. Here's another example for the horizontal nav. So it's up at the top. And I guess it does get cut off a little bit when you resize it a bit. So I don't know if that's intended, but you can scroll the top section over here. So I don't know if that's an issue or not. And then if you make it even smaller, that's when you can see it pop up into the next row. And then over here, it's just another example with a simple nav. And then lastly, we have an example with the group nav, and just demonstrating a couple different section styles on the right, a light layout, a dark layout, and an even darker layout, and the default. And that's it.
Yeah, thanks, Joachim. That's a really good practice to do that side by side. I can add that content issue now. As far as the specificity issue, I leave it to you to file that on next.
Yeah, there's a couple issues I can talk to you about, and we can create issues for them. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. All right, thank you. We have Dan next with background image.
Let's see. Hopefully you can see this and hear me. So I worked on the background image, and you would think that this is probably the simplest component that we've had, but at the end of the day, we'll probably have 4 to 5 PRs of all the issues that we found. So the first PR that I had to implement, Gatsby does not have a way for us to show the background image in the full page mode. So that's the first thing I had to fix. It requires some changes to the architecture of the page layouts. Simple enough, but wasn't there. So that allows me to display the background image in the full page mode without, if I didn't have that, I wouldn't be able to see the text in Gatsby app. So the next issue I encountered was that the components, they import CSS. For each component imports their own CSS from PatternFly. And so the first thing I encountered was the images for this. There's 10 images for this background style, and the images were wrong. So we had to fix that in PatternFly Next. So that was another PR. Even though we fixed that, when I went to go back to the background component, those paths were still not correct for Gatsby. They weren't correct for React Core, so I had to find a way to override those image paths. Basically, when you're including CSS, the image paths they're already resolved. We're using global variable for the image path, but it's already been resolved. We can't override it. Based on the way Webpack imports these React components, React components are always styles for the React components are always output last in the page. So even though I can create my own styles to override PatternFly Next. The component always wins because Webpack is outputting that last. So I need another way to override the image pass. And what I did last night, basically I created another PR for PatternFly Next to add some variables for all the image paths used by the background image. So you see I have some variables. I created some, this is how it's used with the background image style, some global styles. But basically that allows me to, first of all, we have to compile the CSS in PatternFly Next. And PatternFly Next has its own Gatsby app. So, similar to React Core, they both have Gatsby. So yeah, this seems to work well. It's allowing me to override the variables where needed. The PatternFly CSS has the correct image paths now. So like I said, there's at the end of the day there'll be 4 or 5 PRs. But Dana helped me out with this. We worked on it. We started working on this last Friday and finally have a good solution, I think. So that's about it, unless anybody has any questions.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. I'm glad to hear it got to a good place. Yeah, that was a deceiving issue. Dana, you have PR previews.
Yeah, I didn't realize that.
All right. So real quickly, I think a lot of people have already seen this, but just since we're doing a sprint demo, show a screen. Find a screen. Jeez. All right. Do you see PR here?
Yep.
Okay. So just with all of our PatternFly React PRs, we now have a deployment that's automatically added to Surge, and PatternFly Build is the user that should be creating this. You should see it right at the top as far as should happen pretty quickly once the build check has completed on Travis. So you'll see it once the Travis PR build finishes, then it creates this. So once the checks have passed, you'll see this deploy created. And then once you're in the deploy, you can see either PatternFly 3 React or PatternFly 4 React. So this one is the storybook, and this is our new PatternFly 4 React workspace. And the reason we had to do both of those is I couldn't really find a decent way of looking at a PR and determining just which part it affects. There is this part, but there's nothing that's really guaranteed to be there unless the user is really aware of it. So I thought better off just defaulting and giving everybody all of the deploys. So that should be present, and then we're going to start using that deploy as the main deploy when things are merged back to master, so that will be available. So when you're here, instead of seeing just the PatternFly 3 storybook, we'll be editing that to just have one Surge deploy, and that's what we'll start moving to. So that's all.
Thanks, Dana. Super helpful. One note, as I was showing a designer this yesterday, I was like, oh yeah, these previews are available now. And just it wasn't recognizable to a designer that PatternFly documentation deployment meant preview. So I don't know if we can customize that terminology at all, or if it's just a learned thing.
Yeah, I mean, we can change it to whatever you want. Like hopefully people see links and click on them. But yeah, whatever, if somebody has a recommendation on either a place to put it or a better way to word it, it's really simple.
I was the designer. Now that I know it's not a problem, I wasn't sure what documentation was.
I mean, I do love saying PatternFly documentation deployment, but maybe something like preview might be a little easier for you.
Oh, all right. I don't have strong feelings about it, so it's fine.
All right. All right. Well, oh no, I'm sorry. We have Jen with the testing addition to the accessibility documentation.
Hey, so this is really quick. If you are on the accessibility guide from within PatternFly Next Core, and you click this last link for testing here, it'll take you to the section with some help helpful information about how to test for accessibility issues. So one of the updates I made here was to list out the screen readers that we've narrowed it down to, as well as the browser that we usually use those screen readers with. So if you have access to any of these screen readers, that's great, and you're able to test any of your contributions using these screen readers. That would be hugely beneficial to help us with the PR review process. I had stumbled across these references. So just, I think since most of us probably have a Mac, I'll open this one. It just lists the shortcut keys for the screen reader. So it's a helpful resource. I don't have any of these key commands memorized. I'm constantly having to open these pages to remind myself what key commands to use to navigate a web page using whichever screen reader I'm using. So just wanted to point out those resources there. And then also added this new item to the very top to reference the Axe tooling that we're using. So you can, for any product that you're working on, you can install a plugin for Axe to just check for accessibility violations. If you are contributing, I have a link to the README page where we have more information about how to use Axe within the context of PatternFly for core. So how do you run this tool within your environment? And then also when you come across violations, what are some of the action items you can take related to those violations? And that's it for me. Any questions?
Great, thanks, Jen. One thing I did want to point out is that we have things that we've previously demoed in last demos that have recently merged. And so they are not getting demoed again, but I did want to call them out as just, let everyone know that these recently have been merged and are can be now seen on either patternflynext.com or the React workspace. And I do have links either over to that PR as well as, or the workspace. And so just wanted to call your attention to that. I won't read the list, but leave you guys to it. Other than that, is there any questions or anything else that we want to share today? All right, well, I'll give you guys about 15 minutes back, and thanks for joining us. We'll be posting this to YouTube and sending it out to the email list later. Thanks, everyone.